Doing good. All right. Perry Kalmus, nice to meet you. Is that how you say your last name? Kalmus?
Kalmus, yeah, thanks for having me.
Excellent. Excellent. So Perry, I saw your piece on WGN. I think it was probably within the last 2 or 3 weeks, and it just caught my eye. Of course, anything AI related, I'm always paying attention with that, especially with this podcast in the Innovation Room. Also, my company is involved in AI as well. Um, and when I saw the application that you're doing there with artificial intelligence, I thought this was really novel, and that's why I immediately reached out to you and your team there to see if you wanted to be on the show. So again, I appreciate you coming on here to talk about Akala.
Yeah, absolutely. No, the WGN piece was great. It actually, a lot of the attention came off of, I don't know if you saw the college admissions documentary, Operation Varsity Blues,
No.
on Netflix. But we were my co-founder Barbara and I were two of the experts interviewed in that. That was the whole scandal with USC and
Oh, okay.
Stanford and everyone sort of Lori Loughlin, right, like buying her way into schools.
Right.
Um, and so they did a crazy explosive documentary. I highly recommend it. They did a really fantastic job of sort of blending interviews with experts like us, and then actually they did these reenactments of the actual FBI taped recordings of the conversations between Rick Singer, who was and then the parents who were, obviously paying to have their kids get into these fancy schools. So anyway, that's how the WGN thing happened. And
Okay.
yeah, we're happy to be here. And we always point out that we are AI enabled, but we are also a blended model because we believe that tech only will never work in education. And so we do actually give kids access to our expert college counselors.
Got it. Got it. So let's go to the foundation here, right at the beginning. So Akala is why don't you give an explanation of really what the concept is around your company and how you're helping kids?
Yeah, so we've been in the business of college admissions for 26 years now. I think Barbara started this company in 1994. I joined it in 2003. So we've been in the business of college admissions mostly for wealthy families for 26 years and almost 15,000 students. And a few years ago, we just realized, we weren't doing anything to really help close the gap. In fact, we were probably helping to widen the gap by helping the rich kids who didn't need the help, right? So we thought to ourselves, how can we take our level of expertise, which we know has enormous value, right? I mean, if you think about the one thing in this whole process for which the rich will pay, they will overpay extreme top dollar to access, it's people like us. And they access people like us because it works, right? And we have a certain level of expertise that is in high demand. And our thought became, how do we get that level of expertise to everyone? And so we came up through an incubator at Google and up in Mountain View, and we designed this platform. And the idea was that it was going to solve a few huge problems, right? So one is you'll often hear people talk in America, in this field, about there's 500 kids for every one counselor in America.
Mm-hmm.
And people say, wow, that's such a big number. It's actually not a big number. That's a really manageable number if that college counselor, that was all that he or she was doing all day, every day.
Mm-hmm.
But the 500 to 1 number is a problem because it hides the truth, which is that one counselor is not a dedicated counselor. He or she is usually a guidance counselor who's dealing with 100 other things. I mean, they are tasked. Guidance counselors are overworked and underpaid in this country. And, college counseling is just a smidgen of what they do. Most of them are not going to the big, professional development conferences and whatnot. So they're not even qualified to give the guidance.
Mm-hmm.
It's funny. There's a big organization called NACAC, the National Association of College Admissions Counselors. And it's great. It's wonderful. It's amazing. And they were bragging this year. I think they got up to like 23,000 counselors or something across 3,500 schools, right? And as wonderful as that is, we sit there and we're like, well, what about, there's 39,000 high schools in America. Like, what about the other 35,000 high schools? Like, they're not getting people to go to this conference. So I was actually talking to this guy the other day who was talking about, like, this is just how divided the situation is. There was NACAC hosted its conference in Salt Lake City a few years ago. So all these counselors, mostly from wealthy schools, although there are a handful from not, right, are descending on this city. And he takes an Uber from like one fancy party to another fancy party. And the Uber driver's like, man, what's going on here? Like, there's so many people, whatever. The guy says, oh, it's the college admissions conference. And the guy's like, wait a second, I'm a college admissions counselor. Like, what? And like, the guy, it was in his own town. He didn't even know about it. Like, that shows you the massive discrepancy. And so anyway, so the big number for us that's really tragic is that there are 17,000 high schools in America that do not have a dedicated college counselor.
I see.
For context, that's 2/3 of our entire public school system. So that's problem number one. Problem number two is that kids are thinking about college too late, usually in the back half of their junior year. If you are, middle, upper middle, wealthy class, it just means if you think about it too late, you may not be matriculating into the most competitive admissions school in the country, but that's okay. You're going to land somewhere and you're going to be great. But if you are so for every 100 kids in an underserved area, only 20 will make it to college and 3 will graduate. So we took a look at that. We're like, this is unacceptable from a humanitarian perspective, obviously, but also from a societal one. Like, we won't survive. America won't survive this mass undereducation of its people. I think I saw a stat the other day. China's pumping out like 600,000 engineers a year, and we're pumping out like 70,000. Like,
wow,
we're just never going to keep up with what's going on around the globe. And so,
so when it comes to the counselor, So, when it comes to the work the counselor's doing, let's just talk about, the job of the counselor for a minute. It's been a few years since I actually talked myself with the counselor. Tell me about, what's the typical kind of program, what's the conversations they're having? I have two, like I told you in the email when we first met, I have 2 kids that just started at Iowa University. They're a freshman and a sophomore in University of Iowa. But I wasn't privy to all of the different things that they were talking to their counselor about. They told us a bit, we saw a few things, but what's the job of the counselor really at the core? What are they really saying and doing with the kids?
Yeah, I mean, the answer is like most of them are saying nothing and doing nothing right now because they can't, like, the ratios are too high and they're tasked with 100 other things. But in a dream world, what they would be saying is really, in a dream world, you would be getting to kids in 8th grade and starting to give them guidance on their decision making on the categories that colleges are going to consider when evaluating a candidate, right? So talking to them about their community service, their extracurriculars, their summer experiences, their course selection, which is perhaps the most important. The number one thing a grade 12 student will tell you when they meet someone like us, right? Like, they'll ask us one question, and we always say, we're on a mission to end this question. I want no grade 12 student to be able to get to grade 12, meet me, have me start asking those questions about community service and summer experience and extracurriculars and recommendations and whatnot, and start asking the question, why didn't anyone tell me this information? Like, why am I hearing about this in grade 12, right? Like, so that's really, like, in the dream world, the counselor would be guiding them on those decisions because those decisions matter, right? So, like, the reason why we talk about 8th grade is there's a decision you make in 8th grade that literally can affect the rest of your life, which just sounds hyperbolic, but it's not. which
Mhm.
is the decision to go on the honors track or the regular track. And there are
Okay.
so many kids who get straight A's. They're perfectly qualified for the honors track. And for like innocent reasons, just choose not to go on the honors track. They're like, oh, let me just get adjusted to high school and whatever. But no counselor tells them, like, oh, you actually can't jump to honors later.
Yeah.
Right.
Mm.
So that's really what the counselors are doing. And then it's also about things like, look, you can do debate and model Congress and model UN. And these are amazing. I love those extracurriculars, but there's so many kids who do those. So, like, are you really differentiating yourself
Sure.
when you're trying to eye towards grade 12 and applying to college? And so, those are the kinds of things that counselors should be talking to kids about.
So with the history of your company, like as you said, and since the beginning, you act as a third party counseling organization apart from the schools, and then some
Yeah.
of the wealthier families, they hired you on to become that the actual counselor, since it maybe wasn't happening at the school, or they weren't happy with what they had at the high school, to give them that edge to be able to get
Yep.
to the track that's best for them. And and so
Absolutely.
the kids who can afford that third, it's kind of like the Huntington Learning Center. Like if you can afford to go to the extra, the out of school programs, then you might get an advantage. Um, so
Yeah.
so how many kids in that you saw in the past? So were you seeing, why were they coming to you? So assuming that these kids also had a counselor at school at some level. um what was
Right.
prompting parents to say, I'm gonna hire this company, because, why were they thinking that the high school counselor or whoever wasn't doing the job?
Yeah, I mean, most schools, right? Like the counselors, if they're even able to get to the kids, are getting to them in their junior year.
Okay.
And what I think enough parents have, it's like parents are talking to parents, right? So you've got freshmen and sophomores in high school. Your buddy or friend or neighbor might have someone who's got, or sorry, freshmen, sophomores in college. Your buddy or neighbor might have a freshman, sophomore in high school saying, and you might be sitting there, man, I wish I had known all this stuff, because then maybe I would have sent them to a different place, right? No
Yeah.
offense to Iowa. I love Iowa. I think it's a great school. I dressed up as a bird when they were here in the Rose Bowl. Um, but no, so oh wait, is that Iowa State or
Yeah, it's
Iowa?
the University of Iowa is the Golden Hawk. Yeah.
The Golden
The
Hawk. Yes, okay. So
yeah,
yeah, so I dressed up as a bird. So
Tiger
anyway,
Hawk.
but you might have said to your friend, like, oh, well, had I known X, Y, and Z, right? And then I think what happened historically was the friend was going, well, I'm not going to wait for junior year for my kid to get screwed over for the guidance, right? So I'm going to start hiring these private college counselors, and that's what started to make that industry boom. Because we do have a level of expertise, and there's a lot of nuance to
Hmm.
college admissions. A lot of people, we talk about it all the time. Like, everyone's obsessed with these rankings, which we hate. Like, if I could get rid of US News tomorrow, I would shut down that organization. But um, you know, we want kids to have a better understanding, and we tend to have it in a lot of the counselors at the schools. If they haven't done the professional development and they're not constantly improving the way we are, because that's our livelihoods, right? Like,
Hmm.
then they're not privy to or knowledgeable of all the different options that are available to kids. And, like, a lot of
Yeah.
kids grow up in a state and they say, well, I'm just going to go to state, right? I'm
Sure.
going to go to Iowa, I'm going to go to Iowa State. And that might be the best scenario for you, but it also might be a terrible scenario for you. And
Hmm.
we as counselors have a general sense of, like, what is the right option for a kid, and also what are the kid's dreams. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
if the kid wants to go into Hollywood, like, maybe Iowa's not your best film school in the country, right? But, like, and
Yeah.
maybe we'll send you to Florida State, or maybe we'll send you to USC out here. So each school has its own strengths and weaknesses, and based on what a kid's dreams are at 18, knowing full well that can change. We want to make sure they're finding the schools that are the right fit for those dreams.
Right.
Like, if you want to be an engineer, what a Purdue. Like Purdue's an amazing engineering school if you can't get into MIT or one of these other crazy admissions ones. So with
Right.
low acceptance rates.
Right. So how important is the standardized test, the ACT, SAT, these days? I know it's changing. And I thought I heard
Yeah, we're
something
kind of
that,
at a fork in the road.
yeah,
Um,
explain what's happening there.
So, a lot of schools with the pandemic turned test optional, meaning you can turn in a test if you were able to take it. Like out here in California, you couldn't take it. But in some states that were more open during the pandemic, you could. So it was optional to turn it in. It's going to be optional again this coming fall to turn it in for the
Okay.
majority of schools. But I think you're going to see a lot of schools going test optional. I mean, the problem with the test is that there's two big sides of this test. One is it skews heavily against poor kids, right? Because poor kids can't afford the Huntingtons and the Princeton reviews and all these sort of expensive test prep programs. And those test prep programs give a decided advantage to those who can take them, right? So
Mm-hmm.
on the one hand, these tests are horrible. On the other hand, there's 39,000 high schools and incentives are misaligned, right? Let's say, did your kids go to private or public?
Public school. Yeah.
Public. So at private schools in particular, but even public schools, right? Like it's really important that your kids go to great schools and by the way, we put heavy quotes on great because we hate these rankings, but it's important that your kids go to great schools as decided by some stupid magazine that has nothing to do with college, but whatever. Because those matriculation results, right? Like, oh, we got X amount of kids into the Ivy League and X amount of kids into the top 25 and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Those dictate who wants to go to your school, right? Like, so if you're going to move to a town and you see,
Yeah.
well, that town, 90% of the kids are not going to good, well, I hate using the word good, but not going to competitive schools.
Yeah.
A lot of families won't move to that town, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or similarly, in the private school, why would you pay $40,000, $50,000, $60,000 a year if that school doesn't get your kid into what is deemed to be by a stupid magazine a competitive school, right? So,
yeah.
So therefore, the schools are incentivized to give better grades because better grades will get the kids into better schools, right?
Yeah.
And so grade inflation is a huge problem. And so the SAT and ACT became sort of the great equalizer. It's like, well,
Mm-hmm.
You're claiming this 4.5 GPA, which seemingly seems really smart, but you can't break a great score on this test. Like something seems fishy there, right? So
Yeah.
it was sort of an equalizer for school. So what my hypothesis is, and could be totally off here, but my hypothesis or guess is that you're going to see a sort of unspoken rule. And the unspoken rule is going to be if you're from a upper middle, like middle to upper middle to wealthy neighborhood, you better get your butt in there and take that test.
Yeah.
Because we know you can afford the test prep and we know you could have taken it.
Yeah.
And if you don't come from one of those neighborhoods, it's going to be okay to not turn in the score. And frankly, I think that's fair. Like, to be honest with you, like, I think, I hate that the underserved areas they shouldn't have to take this test. They can't afford the test prep. So that's where we're going with the test.
Right. Okay. Makes sense. So let's talk about Akala and the newer innovation that you have developed in order to combine more technology with your counseling experience in order to help these kids at a younger age. What exactly is happening? And you say AI powered. What does that mean in your space?
Yeah. So we effectively wanted to build a platform that anybody could take our platform plus the curriculum that we've designed. So, we'll say Mike, pretend he doesn't have kids going who are now he hasn't even gone through the process ever. So he knows zero about college admissions. In that hypothetical version of Mike, He knows nothing about the process. We could give him this platform in the curriculum starting in 8th grade, and he could guide his kids, or if he's at a boys and girls club, or if he's at a school, or wherever you are, that you could guide those kids to college pretty much 90% better than the kids were going to get before, which most cases is zero. And then 90% wasn't good enough for us. We wanted you to have that final 10%, which is access to people like us.
Right.
So the way the product works is you onboard an 8th.
Perry? I think we're frozen, Perry. Hold on one second.
Are you back?
Yeah, can you hear me okay?
I can hear you now. Yeah, sorry, it cut out there for a
It
second.
really froze right when you said the way it works.
Yeah. Okay. So the way it works is you onboard in 8th grade. We want everything to be customized to the kid's school, and the town that the kid lives in. That way, the technology can handle the lion's share of the technology plus a human implementing it, right? So either the parent or the Boys and Girls Club staff member or the school counselor or whoever could handle most of it. And then, like I said, anytime you have a question, like, should the kid take math honors or math regular? Should the
Right.
kid do this extracurricular or that community service? You could get an answer from us, right? So when you onboard in 8th grade, everything is divided into the categories that colleges consider when evaluating a candidate. So things I've mentioned before: classes, extracurriculars, community service, summer experience. When you say, for example, go to extracurriculars, and a lot of kids arrive in 9th grade, they don't know what they want to do. We have you take this super quick survey. It's just 24 photos. Pick the categories that interest you. Up will come all the organizations, like the student clubs at your school, that have anything to do with your interest category. So, for example, if you selected history, up might come Model Congress and Model UN and Debate Club and whatever, right?
Yeah.
So, and then we take it a couple steps further. We give you, if you don't know what Model Congress is, you could watch a YouTube video in app on like what is Model Congress. So you get kids exploring within their interest categories. And then we take it even a step further than that. We give you the contact information for the head of the club, if that's publicly available, so that you can contact them to get involved with the club. Then from an AI perspective, let's say, Mike, you're the counselor implementing this for a group of 10 kids. We have a whole calendar feature that will start to, you might say, hey, everybody, I want everybody to watch a TED Talk by Friday.
Right.
And write a journal entry on it. Well, the day before, we'll text message you, right? Like the technology will, right? We'll text message you and say, hey, did you have a chance to watch it? Don't forget it's due tomorrow. The kid writes back, not yet. Like, okay, cool. You think you could do it? Like, yes, great. All right, cool. I'll text you in the morning to remind you again, right? Like, but that's all the technology doing that. So that's how we're sort of utilizing AI to try and scale Mike's ability to expand from 10 kids, maybe in that example, to 50 kids or 100 kids or 200 kids, because a lot of the messaging can happen where people think it's Mike, like Mike is their counselor,
right?
But it's really the technology texting you. And so that's where we're headed with it. I mean, we've stepped it back a hair as we do our fundraise. So we're actually manually doing a lot of the texting now. Because we want to fine tune some of those AI algorithms, but that's sort of where we're headed with it.
Got it. So when it comes to like any of the matching, so I was imagining a scenario where you get a student who expresses interest in a few things, and the algorithm is helping say, you know what, here's the top 5 schools that kind of meet these criteria of what you are interested in, and presenting that back as an option. So there's some fuzzy matching happening along the way to say, here's how my interests are changing. Here's like my universe of all the stuff I'm thinking about and doing for the future. And then the platform might be helping uh, surface these different options. Is that
Yeah, that's exactly where we're going with it.
okay?
Right now, we have eighth graders who have reached 10th grade, so we're actually not there yet,
Yeah,
and that's great. That was designed intentionally, right? Because that part that you just mentioned is the most complex part, is actually matching the kids. But
yeah,
I'll tell you, we're going to take it one step further, which is going to be pretty cool. Which is that really off of just we have kids writing journal entries, and really off of just a few sentences, programs like Watson, IBM Watson, and
yeah.
um, the programs like that are able to actually pull upwards of 52 different personality insight indicators. Are
Sure,
you
sure.
introverted, extroverted, willing to challenge authority, adventurous, whatever? And what we are planning on doing with it now, and like we've started to write up these algorithms, we haven't implemented them yet.
Yeah.
But the plan is to be able to say to a kid, hey, based on what we know about you,
Hmm.
right, and your personality, schools have personalities too, right? So like
Yeah.
the idea of being like, if you're an introverted kid, like Arizona State and Florida State, probably not the schools for you, if you're more on the introverted side. So we can start to match schools, Lewis and Clark up in Oregon, great school if you're an adventurous person, and you'd like to get
Hmm.
outside and do hikes and
Sure.
whatnot. So we can start to match kids based on their personalities, which is huge. But then we can take it even further than that and start to say, well, the AI will get smarter, right? So it'll be like, well, we found 150 or 3,000 kids who kind of look, act, and feel just like you, and these are the 10 schools where they've been the happiest,
Sure. Sure.
right? And so that's sort of where we're headed with it.
That's fascinating. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I mean, there's it's so daunting, right, for these kids to think. I know I just went through it with my two kids, for them to say, oh, what do they really want to do? Um, Making decisions on what path they want to go down, and what schools have to offer. We did a couple visits, in a couple different schools, and the there was the what you don't see on paper. There is, when you walk in and you're walking the grounds of the school, and you say, does this
Uh, I think you're back. Oh, wait, but I think you're on mute.
Okay. Can you hear me? Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay. I don't know what happened. That's a first.
Yeah. It's all good. You got cut off for me when you said it's so daunting, and that's the last thing I heard.
Okay. So, for these kids that, when they're, in this age of, teenagers, and they're going to figure out, oh, I need a decision for the rest of my life, like what I want and I grew up kind of thing. And they, and so that, there's the what program should I be thinking about? Schools might be right if it's engineering is, and but there's all the intangible, the things that aren't on paper. Like when you go, we did some college visits, and you go and you walk the campus, and you get a feel, meet the people, and it's like, hey, I can see myself at this school. Here, I'll give you an example. So my daughter had her mindset on ASU, and we went down to ASU and did a school visit. We met some people, walked the campus, and she got home. She's like, yeah, I don't know for me. She just thought, for whatever reason, whatever paper, whatever, she thought maybe the sun was out, that could be this. But then she she looked at the educational program at University of Iowa. We walked on campus, met some people within a half hour. She's like, this is my home. This is where I'm going. And
Totally.
so how do you help these kids on the intent, like what, like you're going to live there for 4 years? Is it, how do you help them does your form help them decide on those intangibles?
Yeah, I mean, look, a lot of it is sometimes you need a human to be like, based on my assessment of you, I think you should check out this school. And like, I've got 15,000 data points to say that like you would be happy here, right?
Sure.
And every now and then we're wrong, but most of the time we're right. Like we have a good sense of what kids are like and where they'd be happy. But that's what I was talking about with the AI, where like it's like, and I intentionally said we didn't just send 3,000 kids here or 1,000 kids to these 10 schools. We sent them there and they were happy, right? And your sort of profile plus your personality insights fit what happened with them, and we could draw you there better. I will say to you though that, and this is of course a problem for underserved kids because going to travel to all these, it's expensive. But somehow, right, we got to try and find a way to get kids on these campuses, because I had this same exact experience as you. I went to Williams College, which has the glorious ranking, which I hate, but if it's going to exist, at least I could rub it into my friends, right? But Amherst is our big rival. Amherst is the number 2 school. So Williams is ranked number 1, Amherst is number 2. In reality, they're all the same. And but I walked on Amherst campus, and I'm telling you, Amherst on paper, in my opinion, is the better school on paper, right? It's an hour and a half closer to Boston. Williams is like in the middle of nowhere. It's a 5-college town, so that has what's called reciprocation, meaning even though you go to Amherst, you could take classes at UMass Amherst or Smith or Mount Holyoke or whatever those 5 colleges are. You could take the classes there and get credit, which is huge. And then, oh, sorry, am I super choppy right now?
No, you're good. Good.
Okay. And then I always like to joke, and if you are a straight male or a lesbian, Amherst is really a great choice because 2 of those 5 colleges are all girls' schools, right? So, Amherst on paper was just like a better school. I walked on that campus 5 minutes, just like your daughter. And I was like, Mom, get me the hell out of here. I'm not going to the school. And then I walked on Williams campus, and it felt, just like your daughter, it felt like home. And that's something, those intangibles are always going to be very hard to technologize, or whatever the word, technify, like techify, maybe, I don't know, whatever the word is, but like those will always be hard to do, but I think we can get like as close as possible, right? Like I think at this point it's like the kind of thing where like, look, if a score of 100 is you get to work with me personally and you get to tour all the schools I tell you to tour, right? Like that's the dream scenario. Well, it's like, well, how close can we get to that? Well, right now kids are getting 0. So like there's a wide gap.
Sure.
But if we could get them all the guidance and some of
Oh, we got a little freezing happening again. 1 second, Perry.
Can you hear me now? Wait, you're on mute again.
Well, that's unfortunate that they're having those problems, but I got your point with going from 0 to 100 in the gap as far as that, getting them situated in the right way in order to make those decisions. Let me ask you about, you talked about the the kids that are underserved a lot, and I know it's a mission you have there at Akala. About how your plan is helping opening up these options for underserved kids.
Yeah, a lot of that is rooted in, I went to Williams. There's a very famous alum from Williams who's Steve Case, who's the founder of AOL.
AOL, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And so Steve has a very cool, one of his funds is called the Rise of the Rest Fund. And the thesis is pretty simple, right? It's like something like, oh wait, do we freeze again?
You're good. You're good.
Hello, hello.
You're there.
You can hear me?
Yeah, yes, I can.
Okay. So so Steve has this. Okay, perfect.
Yeah.
So Steve has this Rise of the Rest Fund, and the thesis is like some ridiculously high percentage, like 95% of venture dollars goes to the 4 cities. It's like LA, Silicon Valley, Boston, New York. And his thesis was like, well, surely someone else has a decent freaking idea for a business in this country. Like, let's target out of there. And so they go on a bus and they'll show up in like Toledo, Ohio, and if you're from Toledo, you can show up and pitch Steve Case on a business, and if they like it, they'll fund it. And I think they did. I think they funded now like 200 plus companies.
Wow.
In the last 5 years, 6 years. So anyway, so our thesis is also similar. It's like, how much genius are we leaving on the table by not getting kids this critical guidance, right? Like,
sure.
And also, it's also like the most obvious thing. And sometimes I feel like I'm like the sane person in the insane asylum who sounds crazy. I'm like, I'm like, guys, we built this K-12 education system. It is designed to get to grade 13, which is college, or, by the way, an equivalent pathway, right? It could be vocational school or a coding boot camp or whatever, but
sure.
It's designed to get to that post-secondary pathway. And it's very complicated to figure out those pathways, right? Whether it's applying to a 4-year or picking one of those other pathways. And yet nobody tells you how to do it. Like, it's like the most ass backwards system that I've ever imagined. And so
that's so true. I haven't thought about it like that, but 100%.
Yeah, crazy. And so our thing is like, I gave you a lot of doom and gloom numbers before, right? Like, 20 out of every 100 kids in an underserved area will make it to college. Only 3 will graduate. Like, but amidst all those numbers, there was one glimmer of hope. And it's also why we start in 8th grade, which is that 94% of middle school kids will tell you that they have the dream of going to college.
Right.
And so our thesis becomes very similar to Steve Case's thesis, right? Which is like, let's get to them then, right?
Yeah.
When they still have the dream, let's give them, instead of giving them 0 to 2 touch points with college across the entire 4-year spectrum, which is what they're getting now, let's give them 100 to 150 touch points with college, and more kids are going to get there. And the more kids that get there, the better our society will be. It's like, I just saw a headline the other day, and I haven't read the article yet, but like the thing was like, if we spent $4 trillion on our education system, it's obviously a fortune, that it would pay itself back in 10 years, right? Some study came out like because like you think about those kinds of numbers out of underserved areas, and there are so many underserved areas, right? You're literally talking about like millions of people who can't get a degree in this country and can't therefore climb the economic ladder. Like, it's not an acceptable situation.
Right. And so you're and the way you're put together, it's easy enough to be able to get an account early for a kid when the 7th or 8th grade. They could take advantage of the virtual counseling and some of the in counseling that you have there, and it's affordable for them. I'm assuming that's the whole point.
Yeah, exactly. Right now, through youth engagement organizations, so like Boys and Girls Clubs, police athletic leagues, Big Brother, Big Sister. These are like established organizations that have established relationships, positive relationships with these kids. I think across the big 4, you're talking about something like 12 million kids, right? So like, that's more than we can handle. So like, that's a good place to start. And what we're basically doing is giving them this platform in the curriculum. They implement the whole program, and we're there in support whenever they need it.
Gotcha. That's fantastic. So Perry, you're very passionate about this. I love it. I mean, it's great to hear from some expert in this field as far as what needs to change to help these kids see a brighter future. What led you to Akala? Like, and how did you determine that there was a tech play here in order to make things happen there?
Yeah, I mean, a couple things sort of led to it. Like, one is, I had a tech startup prior to this in the bar and nightlife space. My goal always was to sell that company for like $1 billion and then use my crazy wealth to like just change education the way I want to see it done, right? Instead of having to go through like bureaucracies and governments and whatnot. Sadly, that company, we had a Series A fall through in the 11th hour. Didn't work. We folded it. But so I was looking for something else to do. Education has always been my passion. Impact has always been my passion. For me, like, I always think about it like, if I die and a lot of people don't care for good reason, like meaning like I was doing such a great thing for society, like trying to lift up the bottom half, then I think it wasn't a life worth living, right? And I know that's like a strong statement, but I don't care. That's how I feel. Like, I just really feel like, I'm a super fortunate guy, and I had a amazing upbringing, and like, we weren't poor, and I've seen so many kids who we have touched their lives, who were underserved, who are now doing great things and making great salaries. And it's like, I want more of that. It's like the best serotonin hit you can ever have in your life is to watch an underserved kid begin to change the trajectory upwards of his or her family. Like, that is just an amazing moment. And I want more of it. I want like millions of those hits. So that's what led us there.
That's fantastic. And how long ago did you start doing the tech side of your platform in order to make all this accessible?
Yeah, so we came up through the incubator at Google in 2016.
Okay.
And then there's another big ed tech giant called GSV, Global Silicon Valley. They're actually based in Chicago. But they, so we came up through an incubator as well there. We launched our first product, spent a year trying to build it, and then we launched our first product in the fall of 2017. As tech startups go, the first product was terrible. And then, we got great feedback from teachers and kids and whatnot, and we built a new product, which is sort of what you see today on our, what the platform looks like today. So, yes, we'd like to say we've been at it like really 3 years. The first year was pretty bad, but it was a good start.
Sure.
It got us
familiar with that. Yeah, one, is always version 1. Version 3 kind of makes things better. A couple last questions here, Perry. So what do you see the future of Akala? Like, you look out, 5 even years. What are you hoping for yourself and for Akala there?
Yeah, I mean, in my sort of like bold thinking, it's like, Akala needs to be in every curriculum of every high school in America. And in my opinion, here's the platform. You sign on once a week. You have a touch point with college, whether that's inputting your grades or watching a TED Talk or writing a journal entry or researching a school or whatever it is on our curriculum. I think every kid in America should have to engage with their post-secondary futures starting in 8th grade. Like, that's my dream. In what is more probably realistic, given the bureaucracy and nature of our education system, is that I would like to be in every youth engagement organization.
Okay.
So I want to transform every youth engagement organization into a college access network. So yes, Boys and Girls Club is a wonderful after school program, and I love them, and they're amazing, and they do incredible things. But like, what was the point if we don't also get them to college? And so transforming them by barely changing what they're doing, right? That's the beauty of Akala, is like, we're not asking you to like revamp your company, right? We're asking you to take one day a week and, you know, somewhere between 10 minutes and like 45 minutes, asking the kids to engage with their futures. And we think that that's not a lot to ask. And frankly, we think it'll drive a lot more funding to these organizations, right? Like if you're a Boys and Girls Club and, you know, you're keeping kids off the streets after school, that's great. But if you keep them off the streets after school and then they go to college and get degrees and change the trajectories of their families, like the amount of funding available to you will be endless. Like there is no limit to that amount of funding. So that's where I sort of envision Akala.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Well, you know, thank you, Perry. It's very inspiring to see what you guys are doing there. Your passion around the subject. It's great to see these technologies being used in such a way. You know, AI and you know, there's a lot of criticism for some of these high tech you know, out there, especially AI. You know, always going to steal jobs, is going to do this or that. But we all, and if you're in this, you know, that's not true at all. And it's really great to see how, you know, you're using this thing in order to really make a difference for, you know, of these kids and our country. Let's face it, these are going to be running the place, you know, when we're in another 30 years or so, right? So you know, kudos to you and your team there. I really enjoyed, you know, meeting you, Perry. It was a great conversation. Best of luck with everything at Akala.
Yeah, Mike, thanks for having me, and happy to come back on anytime.
Absolutely. We'll have you back and do a follow-up.
All right, sounds good. Talk to you soon.
Okay, thank you. Okay, bye-bye.